Hey, welcome back to our Journey with Jesus Bible study, where we're going through the Bible chronologically in a year using the Tara Lee Cobble Bible Recap Study Plan. Today, because I've been a little behind, we are going to go through day 32 and 33, and partially because I'm a little behind on the videos, but the main reason I didn't do two separate ones is because this is all of the plagues. And while they have different nuances to them, they are all representative of kind of one big thing. And so I feel like we can cover it in one video. Okay, so starting in chapter 7, we see God telling Moses to tell Aaron things to go tell and show Pharaoh and his magicians or whatever. And we see that God goes ahead and tells him, it's like, he's not going to listen to you. You're going to have to do these things. I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. And what we do learn as we study this a little bit is that God is not in the business of hardening somebody's heart that is willing to soften it. And so one of the biggest things that, people who are against the Christian faith say that, well, what kind of God would harden somebody's heart? Isn't he a God of wanting to soften hearts? Well, yes, he is. But if you are adamant that you are not going to soften your heart, he's going to give you over to whatever you want. He's going to allow that to happen. He's just not going to try to soften it for you. And so that's what we're seeing here. We're not seeing him, that Pharaoh would be a willing participant to soften his heart. He is not. He's not willing, and the Lord's he's not even going to try. And what we do see throughout this is that, Pharaoh is like, okay, go pray to your Lord, go pray to your God and make this, stop. I believe you now, or whatever. It was only because he was remorseful for the consequences of his actions. Even in the Exodus, we see that he changes his mind. He wakes up the next morning, and he realizes that they have to go get their own things. They have to build their own stuff. And then they change their minds, and they're like, oh, we're going to go get that. How can we let them escape from serving us? And so, it's kind of one of those things that it's like the repentance that we do see Pharaoh do is false repentance. And so we see that there, that even when he does attempt to fake whatever it is, it's fake, it's not real. And so you see that whatever hardening that is being done is by Pharaoh's own choice. And we see God telling Moses and Aaron, or Moses and then via Aaron, that all of this is the goal of all of these plagues is for Egypt to know that Yahweh, or that God, that Yahweh is Lord, that he is it. He is the only one and true God. And he's trying to make that known to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh. And we see that Pharaoh, he never really believes, and he pays for that. But there are Egyptians that do turn. And so when we say that God is a long-suffering God, and that, there are things that he could do that are different, or to change things or whatever, there's a reason that he doesn't. He could have snapped his fingers and made the Israelites be out of Egypt. He could have done all of those things, and it would have spoken to the Israelites, right? Like, it would have been like, God freed us from this, and they had this, and they would have been broken from bondage and all that kind of stuff. The result would have been the same. But the way that he did it was to teach, to show he was over all of these gods that he is fixing to, with all of these plagues, show judgment on. And so if he would not have done that, then some of these Egyptians wouldn't be saved. And we see the same thing happen in Revelation about, there are all of these different seals and trumpets and all these different things that happen. And I mean, God could have snapped his fingers again and done, completed his judgment. but he did it the way that he did because he was trying to get, and we see that in Revelation, that he was trying to get every soul that would turn to him to turn to him. And that's what he's doing here. And so what we see with the first plague is that, the Nile, the water is turned into blood. And this is a judgment on the, I think it's Osiris, maybe I'm pronouncing that correctly. But it was believed that the Nile was his bloodstream. And so, and we see that the Nile, everything that you read, the Nile was like a life giver to the Egyptians. That's why they had that God, that it was life giving to them. But what gave life to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh was a river of death to the Hebrews, especially the Hebrew children that he was trying to kill. And so that's what we're seeing here, is that river of life that you thought, well, now I'm turning it to blood. All of those Hebrew children, that blood is now going to cover what you think is giving you life. Oh, and I didn't mention the whole staff and serpent and all that kind of thing. And so, God tells Aaron to throw his staff on the ground. It turns into a snake. Well, the magicians can do the same thing. But we see that Aaron's snake staff, consumes the rest of them, allowing staffs represent the authority, represent authority. And what God is saying here is, I have authority over all the gods that you think that you have. I have authority over them. And another thing to note about in chapter 7, verse 15, it says, "Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water. Stand on the bank of the Nile to meet him, and take in your hand the staff that turned into a serpent." And so, this is where he goes out to the river and he meets Pharaoh where he would have been. The reason he would be going out there is that every morning they went out there to the river to take a bath. That's where they bathed. So especially with Pharaoh being a king, they would have had this elaborate place for them to go. Well, if we look back at chapter 2, we see Pharaoh's daughter was down there at the river bathing. The same place that Moses was found in the basket is going to be the same place that Moses is there now, reaping judgment onto Pharaoh. I'm not going to go through all of the plagues, but what I did want to kind of show is that all of these plagues were representative of different gods that they had. Well, all of Egypt's economy was based on agriculture, and every one of these gods represented something from the agriculture, whether it was water, whether it was sun, whether it was the moon, the stars, all of these different things within nature. This judgment was on them. And so essentially what he's doing is he's taking the entire economy of Egypt and crippling in it and letting them know that I am over every single one of these gods that you think give you life and sustain you. I am it. And one thing too is it was like 3 cycles of plagues. And one thing that all of this that I'm learning, that I'm saying, is what I've learned from Jen Wilkin. And so I highly suggest her God of Deliverance study. If you have not done it, it is amazing and gives you so much perspective on the Exodus story. And there's no way I could cover all of it. You need to purchase the book and watch the videos. So there 3 waves, 3 cycles of 3 up until the death of the firstborn. So, but the first 3 plagues were only were the Egyptians and the Israelites experienced them together. And so I don't think that we think about that, the fact that the Israelites would have experienced the blood of the Nile because they needed it as well. The frogs, they would have experienced that. And then the gnats, they would have experienced that as well. But when it comes to the flies, that was only, everything after that was only on the Egyptians. Okay, and then we get to the ninth plague of darkness. I'm passing over a whole bunch of these plagues. I feel like I could have a video for each one. There's that much into them. But okay, so we're seeing at this point, this is after the hail, the locust take out all their crops. What the hail didn't take out, the locust finished taking out. The livestock are dead. The gnats take over. The flies take over. And just all these different things, the boils that are on their lives, all of this stuff. Egypt is at the point to where they're facing financial ruin. One of the things to note here, though, is that Pharaoh would not have really experienced a whole lot of this, not like the other Egyptians would. And so he's been largely unfazed by a lot of these. Not to say that he wasn't fazed by them, but it hadn't hit home to him like it would have the other Egyptians. And then we get to the ninth plague, the plague of darkness, and it says like a darkness to be felt. We don't really know darkness like this. We have access to so much light, even when all our lights are off. We have like some ambient light from electronics that are plugged in or whatever. We don't know this kind of darkness. And the thing that Jen Wilkin had said that, so this was a judgment on the sun god Ra. Well, it was thought that Pharaoh was the physical embodiment of Ra. And the fact, their legend, their lore went that when the sun went down, Ra wrestled with the serpent of darkness until as soon as the sun goes down, they began to wrestle. And when the sun comes up, that let them know that Ra had won. Well, think about this, that the sun was gone for 3 days, 3 whole days. And so that would have meant if it was a darkness to be felt, that meant that there was no light from the moon either. And so I just thought that was really an interesting thought about like that much of darkness, like nothing. And them thinking at that point, with there being darkness for 3 days, they would have thought that Ra had been defeated. And God is telling them here, I am God. I am over even the biggest God that you think you have. And so I thought that was really interesting. So we fast forward to the final plague that is threatened. They threaten to take the firstborn of all of Egypt. And then it's just kind of like it stops. It's kind of like then it goes to Moses telling about the Passover and all the rules and all that of the Passover and all that kind of stuff. And you're kind of like, wait, why are we stopping? It's almost like it's almost like Moses. And we forget that Moses is the one writing this, right? Moses is writing this 40 years after this in preparation for them to enter the land of Canaan. And so he wants them to realize that and remember and keep the Passover and what it means when they get there, when they get in the land of Canaan. And so he is letting them know, okay, I interrupt your regularly scheduled program. We're going to have a foreshadowing, right? Or maybe it's like a movie where he's writing the movie and it has time jumps, right? Back and forth, back to current, back to in the past, that kind of thing. Well, it would have been, I'm going to say that this will be, we're writing in the past and we're jumping forward 40 years. And Moses is kind of, okay, this is the Passover. This is what this means because they're threatening the death of the firstborn. Well, this is how the Israelites were covered in that. And then it skips at the end of chapter 12 to the 10th plague and the death of the firstborn. And so that's kind of that's the way that in my mind it makes sense. Something to note though is that, so I mentioned to you that Jen Wilkin studies the God of deliverance. Well, she relates the whole thing into a birth narrative, like a delivery of a child. And she keeps talking about there being like birth pains and how they increase in intensity. And here with the Passover, you know, they sacrifice the lamb, and there's so much that we could even go into. And I may do a separate video on the actual Passover and the representation of it, because it is amazing in what it represents. And this being part of the birth narrative, well, then, you know, we see that after the death of the firstborn, we see that they are pushed. Thrust is the term that in my Bible is used, and I'm trying to find it if I can find it. The term thrust is what was used for them to be pushed out of Egypt. Pharaoh's like, okay, go. I need you gone. And it being the birth narrative, right? So like after all these birth pains, it comes to a point to where the baby's got to be delivered. Israel has to be delivered. Well, the blood on the doorway is through the doorway. They're thrust through the blood-covered doorway. And so it's just really an amazing, men, I'm sorry for watching this. That may be a little graphic for you. I'm sorry. But it's God is so intentional when he does these things. And it's so, whenever you look at these in the deeper context, and the Exodus story is just repeated throughout the entire Bible, and it's so important for us to know this. Okay, so I think I'm going on like 16 minutes here. I'm so sorry. We go through the Exodus, the death of the firstborn, and then that's it for chapters through 12. Chapters, I think we were doing 7 through 12. So that's it. I will do another video, and I might even try to cover a little bit of the Passover in it, because it talks about it a little bit. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. There's so much that I could have said. I just do not have time. Let me know if you would be interested in a Passover video, or if there's any topics within here that you would like a more detailed video. I would love to do it. I just don't want to bore people. So that was it for day 32 and 33. And I'll do another video for 34, and I'll try to stay on task. Have a good day. Bye.